Okay, now before I commence, I would like to add my acknowledgement to the traditional owners of the place that we're meeting today, the Gimoy, Woolaboro, Yidinji people, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and those yet to be born. And I would like to extend that acknowledgement to all the First Nations people in the room today, and indeed the traditional owners of the Great Barrier Reef. So in my presentation, I'm going to give you a quick fly through the AIMS Indigenous Partnerships approach, and I'll also describe how we've been applying it to the research within the Reef Research Restoration and Adaptation Program, or RRAP. And I want to just acknowledge previous speakers who I think who've told you all about RRAP. I don't need to tell you what RRAP is. But we've been using this to position traditional owners as decision makers about which research activities can and cannot take place on their sea country. And then I'll finish with a little look to the future about how we might try and ramp that up into RRAP going forward. So when we, a few years ago, when we were tasked with developing an Indigenous partnerships plan and approach at AIMS, we began by looking at the ethical guidelines, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, and those documents really guided us. But we also reviewed every document we could get our hands on, which was documenting a traditional owner-led process, either a healthy country plans, regional syntheses. We also consulted widely with our network of traditional owners. We basically made a big effort to try and figure out what traditional owners might want out of a partnerships approach at AIMS. And we tried to design a program that would deliver to that. And we found that there was this huge, we already understood what AIMS's interests were. And once we'd understood better what traditional owner interests were, what they told us, we found that there was this huge area of overlap in areas of mutual interest. And we learnt that it was so much more about synergies in the science that we might be able to do together. It was about respecting traditional knowledge as a valid knowledge system and finding ways to work with that and protect that in work that we might do together. It was also about traditional owners wanting to be through processes like free, prior and informed consent. And also supporting that really important inherited right and responsibility of traditional owners to care for country. So I'm not going to go through all of these key principles in the policy and the plan. They're available on our website if you want to look at it. But I just wanted to draw your attention to the bottom one there. One of our principles is that we will hold our partners and collaborators to the same standard. So that kind of explains how the AIMS Indigenous Partnerships approach came to be applied across all of RRAP. So really quite symbolically, but also quite literally, we kind of got our house in order at AIMS, and we went from just having one flag above our entrance to having 3 flags. So the core mechanism in our approach is this tiered system of engagement. Basically, every single project gets mapped into one of these tiers. Now, if you're going to go to sea and what we call intersect with sea country by collecting samples or doing something manipulative or deploying equipment, at a minimum, you need to sit in that silver tier, and that means that you need to talk to traditional owners and obtain their consent to do that work on their sea country. And I mean, we of course, we want to do more than that if we're going to be developing proper partnerships, but this is the starting point. This is the start of conversations with traditional owners. And what we're seeing is lovely relationships beginning to build between researchers and traditional owners. And of course, that then creates the environment for the next tier, the gold tier, proper co-design and co-delivered partnerships. And it was traditional owners that asked us to add that top tier, platinum tier, which creates a space for traditional owner initiated and led projects that maybe we can support with our capability. Now, also responding to what traditional owners were telling us when we were engaging with them, the common theme was, well, what about, where are the opportunities for our young people? So we've now established a training and capacity building program at AIMS, using our research as a platform for training and capacity building. And it's we're now part of a few programs that engage with high school students, Indigenous high school students. We've got Indigenous internships for undergraduates, Indigenous undergraduates, to come and do some work placements at AIMS. We've got a graduate program, which includes an Indigenous graduate. And we're also focusing on the vocational training sector. And we recently celebrated the Certificate 3 graduation of our first cohort of 4 Indigenous aquaculture trainees. And we basically adapted a training package that's really built for growing fish and prawns. And we made it all about propagating corals for reef restoration research. Okay, so applying all of this to RRAP was a bit tricky, because by the time we had this policy in place and we were ready to go, the funding cloth had already been cut up for RRAP, and all of the projects had already been fully scoped and costed. And of course, there was minimal resources available for the traditional owner engagement that we wanted to do in order to get, for example, free, prior and informed consent. So to a large extent, we were retrofitting our policy into a program of research which was already scoped. But nevertheless, we've been able to do that, and every single RRAP project that's occurred out on country has proceeded with free, prior and informed consent, and a whole heap of other engagement with traditional owners. And actually RRAP funded 2 of those aquaculture trainees. And of course there was, and so that most of RRAP is sitting in that silver tier, seeking consent. But there's one project that we really celebrate, and that's our lovely biocultural project that we do in collaboration with CSIRO, where we're claiming there that we do have elements of co-design in that project. So it's not just about consent. We've got ongoing communication. Traditional owners tell us they want to know when, you know, they might give us consent for a 4-year project, but they want to know when people are out on their country. So we do these community flyers and various other communications throughout the projects. Now, of course, there's been lots and lots of challenges, and one of them is figuring out whose sea country is where. We love it when there's a native title claim or a TUMRA, or there's some other boundary on a map that can give us direction. But we realise that the majority of the World Heritage Area does not have these lines on maps. And so we rely very heavily on the traditional owners in our team, and many of them are sitting over there at the table, and their networks to work out whose sea country is where. And then once we know which group we engage with, we've got to work out what their governance is, who has the cultural authority to grant consent. And of course, there's that science communication challenge, because we're seeking informed consent, which means we need to present sometimes really complex science proposals in an accessible way. Anyway, that's why we have a team. And now here they all are. Yay. Yeah. So this is a really significant investment by AIMS. They really are backing us with just over 12 FTE in the Indigenous Partnerships team. And we've got just over 2.5 FTE dedicated to RRAP across those 6 people that have got the red tick. But anyway, this work would just simply not be possible without their support. So far within RRAP, we've engaged with 23 different traditional owner groups where we've sought consent for projects. And we've facilitated just over 270 paid days where traditional owners have participated in projects, either at sea or in the lab. And over 100 separate engagement meetings. And of course, that number's growing all the time. Now, 23 groups sounds like a lot, but as we heard earlier, there's more than 70 groups on the Great Barrier Reef. Now, we've only been engaging with the groups where projects are proposed on their sea country, but it's just really less than half of the total. So now just quickly looking to the future, where we think we can do much better in the next phase of RRAP, and we're hoping to be able to engage traditional owners in the design of projects and maybe get some truly co-designed projects. We're looking at including biocultural risks and opportunities in decision-making about which deployments might get deployed where, or which projects occur where. And of course, you heard in the last session the lovely presentation by Carl and Kirsten about that project. But importantly, we're also building in a training and capacity building piece so that as those deployments become deployment ready coming out of the R&D program, we're wanting to put together training packages so that those interventions are put in the hands of traditional owners. And So phase 1 of RRAP was sitting in silver, but phase 2, we want to go down into the gold and the platinum. And we got the happy news just last Friday that we have been awarded some funding to develop some micro-credential packages associated with RRAP interventions, including in coral restoration, larval restoration, and this is the first pilot group that we delivered this to last year, and also in marine monitoring, because we know that marine monitoring is a really big part of monitoring the success or otherwise of interventions going forward. And it's an opportunity for traditional owners to be positioned as practitioners and on country looking after their reefs. And that's it. Thank you.